This is how I would manage invoicing, cash flow, making sure that invoices get paid on time, when they're due, what's outstanding within inside of Monday.com. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link in the description below. Anyway, as you can see here, I am inside of my example Monday.com system. Now, the requirement today is to have a means of tracking all of the invoices that need to be sent, that have been sent, whether they're 30, 60, 90 plus days overdue, and ultimately paid. Now, this could work in conjunction with milestones for projects. This could work for all sorts of different aspects of the business. It may be invoice requests come in, and then the finance team need to prepare them, process them, send them, and ultimately make sure that they get paid. And I'm going to show you how to do that in today's video. And then we'll be setting up some reports around invoicing as well in this video today. So it's very easy to see what's going on at a glance. So plus button, top left-hand corner, we're going to go ahead and create a new board. And I'm going to call this invoices. Call it whatever you like, billing, invoices, whatever. Privacy options, either main, accessible to you and anyone else inside of the Monday system, private, only you and select individuals, which I suspect would be the most suitable option here, or shareable. If you want to share this externally, you can do. And then what we're managing in this particular board is invoices. Okay, terminology thing doesn't matter too much. And then we're going to go ahead and press create board. Now, the actual setup of the invoices board, I would say, is relatively simple. As long as we've got some of the key data points and key automations, I think we should be good to go. But my process is going to be as follows. So invoices to be sent, or I call it to be sent invoices to start with. So this is stage one. Every single invoice will be put in as a request to start with. Then the finance team will process them thereafter. So you've got to be sent invoices, and then we have sent invoices. So these are all of the invoices that have been processed, consequently sent to the client. We then have 30 days overdue invoices. And then we have 60 days overdue invoices, and then 90 days overdue invoices, 60 days overdue invoices, and then 90. What I'd probably do in this instance as part of like a standard process is 90 plus days overdue invoices. And then I would have, hopefully quite quickly, we would get to paid invoices, and that would be in the green section here. So we go from to be sent to sent invoices to 30 to 60 to 90 days overdue. I'm just going to adjust the colors on here. So that can be in red. This could be in, I don't know, let's go for an orange, and then 30 days. We'll put that in yellow, for example. Cool. So those are the stages of the process: 30, 60, 90. And then obviously to be sent, and then ultimately paid as well. Now, within that, I then want to just make sure that my status columns match my stages of the process. So we have default labels to be sent, because every single request should be to be sent. We then have sent. We then have 30 days overdue. I'm not going to use the green for that. So 30 days overdue. We then have 60 days overdue. Days overdue. Spell that right? Yeah, cool. And then we'll have 90 plus days overdue. In fact, we used the red one up here for that. 90 plus days overdue. And then we've got paid. And then we can get rid of that one here. Don't need that. And then we'll just adjust the colors. So that was in the yellow, and then that was in the orange. Cool. So reposition that accordingly. Sent needs to be in the purple. To be sent. Sent 30, 60, 90, paid. Easy enough, right? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hide the column summary for our status. We'll come on to creating the automations for the different stages in a moment. But then I'm going to use the date column that already exists as the date created. And then I'll just restrict the column editing on here. Then I'm going to add another date column. And this date column is going to be date paid. And then I'll restrict the column editing for this as well. And then I'd add a formula column on here. And this is going to work out the difference in days between date created and date paid. So give me the difference in days between date created and date paid, and hit enter within the formula for the AI assistant. So this is then going to be called TTP, and this is time to pay. This is really helpful data point for cash flow, because if I know on average it takes 35 days for our invoices to be paid, then I can predict cash flow. The more data you feed into the system, the better we'd have an understanding of cash flow as well. So I'd make sure I have that available to us. We then have basic data points. Let's just say the numbers amount, which is the invoice amount here. So we could go ahead and add that invoice amount. We go to the 3 dotted button settings and just set that as whatever currency you're working in. Let's just say the dollar, for example. And then I can hide the column summary, just reposition this across. We then have, what might else we have? We probably have in fact, we do need this. We need a date column, and then we'd have a due date. So this would be the date in which the payment would be due. And we'll come on to setting up some automations for that in a short while. We might need a files column. This is, I suspect, where you could upload the invoice if you wanted to. Another column that you might have, especially if you're looking to integrate with other systems, is an invoice ID. So every invoice would have a unique reference number. And if you are integrating, even if you're not integrating, I would still make sure that you have an invoice ID, especially when you go from to be sent to sent. So an invoice ID must be created or at least added in order to go from one stage to the next. And then I'm just trying to think if there's additional information that you want to track. Let's say you want to create a connection column between the invoices board and your clients board, or your suppliers board, or whoever you're in. Yeah, I suppose it would be clients, your clients board. Then you can do, and then you can track invoice status by client. If you want to connect it to projects as well, you can create a connection column to your projects. And then in that instance, it's not overly complicated. In fact, it's not even remotely complicated. All you would do is connect your invoices board to your projects board, make sure that the project associated with the invoice is connected. If you're working within milestones, you might have a separate board for milestones, connect the invoice to the milestone, then mirror over the project record. You could then see the invoice status by each of your projects, the billing process per project, and also maybe project manager or other things as well. So you can get into more detail with all of this, but again, I'm just going to go through a relatively rudimentary setup today. So now we've set up what I would argue is the skeleton of the system. Again, by all means, add more data points as you see fit. We then want to walk through all of the automations. So go to automate, top right hand corner, go to manage. The first thing that I would do is when an item record is created, so when a new item is created, we're going to set the date created to today. So that means that every single time a new invoice request is added, it'll automatically populate the date in which it was created. Then we're going to go through the basics of the status changes. So when the status changes to be sent, move item to group to be sent. You're going to have to bear with me here, or at least endure me rambling while we go through the various steps for that, because it's particularly boring. So when the status changes to sent, move item to group sent. Now you might actually track the date in which well, you will, and I'll come on to how you're going to do that in a second, but we'll just go through this basic stuff first. So there it goes. When status changes to 30 days overdue, move item to group 30 days overdue, and then 60 days overdue. When the status changes to 60 days overdue, move item to group 60 days overdue, and then 90 days. You don't really want to get invoices to 90 days overdue if you can avoid it. Status changes to 90 days overdue, move item to group 90 days overdue. And then finally, when the status changes to paid, move item to group paid, which is ultimately what we want to get all of the invoices to. Paid, move item to group paid. Now, I'm going to assume that two things. Well, no, I'm just going to assume one thing. No business should really just be removing invoices off the system. So we're not going to accommodate for invoices that have just not been paid. I mean, you might escalate matters if you needed to, but I don't really want to have a group that says not paid or like disregarded invoices. And then when the status changes to paid, move item to group paid, and also set the date paid to today. Okay. Set date paid to today. Create automation. So now we've got, again, slightly more structure set up here. The next thing that we want to look at is automatically setting the due date. So I would go when status changes to paid, because that's typically the trigger. When the date in which, or at least when the status has been sent, we then have an associated due date. Not paid, sorry. When status changes to sent, move item to sent invoice, yeah. And then we want to go ahead and add another couple of steps. And there would be firstly set date, and we're going to be setting the date due date to today. And then we want to go ahead and push date. And we're going to push the due date by, and then your payment terms. So in most businesses, it's 30 days. So 30 days from the invoice being sent is when the payment is due. So send invoices, then set due date to today, and then push due date by 30 days and just hit update automation. So now what we're going to do is 30 days after, and this is nuanced depending on how you want to track things. But let me give you an example, right? So we changed the status of this invoice to sent. That moves it to the group sent and also sets the due date to 30 days from today, which is the 24th of October. Now, what we want to automatically happen is it move from this group to this group, this group to this group, so 30 to 60, 60 to 90, sent to 30, automatically dependent on the due date. So if we say 30 days after the 24th of October, is that 30 days or is that 60 days? So that's up for you to decide. But if we go to automate and then create automation, and then what we're going to say is when date arrives, and we're going to say 1 day after date arrives at 7:45, and that's going to be the due date. Then, I'm jumping ahead. And then we make sure that and only a status being the status of the invoice, is not equal to paid. Then we change the status to 30 days overdue. So 1 day after due date arrives, and only if status is not paid, then set status to 30 days overdue, which would then move it to the group 30 days overdue, subject to you having set up those automations, of course. So now what we're going to do is exactly the same for the next two. So we then duplicate this and say, I guess it's going to be 31 days or 30 days after date arrives and status is not paid. Then we change the status to 60 days overdue. Again, create the same automation. Then we do 60 days after. So it is, again, this is kind of up to you how you want to manage it, in the sense that it could be literally 90 days. So you've got a 30-day buffer, but hopefully you get the idea. So 60 days after due date arrives and only if status is not paid, change to status 90 days overdue, because technically it is then 90 days overdue. But how you choose to track that is up to you. So now what will happen is it will automatically flow through the various stages of the process until the status is manually changed to paid, or it's integrated and it automatically does that. So that's a basic invoice setup. Again, pretty rudimentary, but hopefully that gives you a good idea as to how to set up kind of the invoice process within Monday.com. I would typically, if it was me, I would then look to integrate this with my accountancy software, whether that's QuickBooks or Xero, automatically create the invoice. Obviously, we would need more data points, for example, the client that we're sending it to, inclusive or exclusive of sales tax or VAT. But you can pull that information across, because an invoice record is going to be triggered by something else. So you can pull that information across, then use Zapier or Make to integrate with Xero or QuickBooks to then create the invoice, put the invoice, send it to the client, update that in the system automatically when the status changes to paid in the QuickBooks system. When you're reconciling accounts, then it would automatically update inside of your system here, based on the invoice ID that acts as the unique reference. So the next thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're then going to go ahead and create some dashboards, or at least some reports around our invoicing process. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new dashboard, and then I'm going to call this invoice dashboard. And these are all of the data points that we could possibly want to track associated with that invoicing. Again, privacy options main or private is entirely up to you in this instance. I'm going to leave it as main, or probably you'd want to have it as private. You don't want anyone inside of Monday.com being able to see the status of invoicing within the business, or you might do, I don't know. But we just want to then make sure that we select the invoices board that's going to pull data into our dashboard, and then just hit done. So now we can create reports around our invoicing. So I'm going to keep it relatively simple. I'm just going to create a few reports, but you can expand on this. And if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We can discuss how we could build something a bit more sophisticated out for you. But the first thing that I'm going to want to know is I want to create a numbers column, and I want average time to pay. So on average, how long does it take to pay? Now, fortunately, we have this TTP here. We can then, so that's time to pay between date created and date paid. I can then go to our invoice dashboard, go to settings, and then I want to select the TTP as the one by one. I'll go TTP, then customize, then go average, manual, 0 decimal places, and then you could even add the unit as days. So I know now that on average, it takes 3 days for an invoice to be paid. The only group that I'd want here is the paid invoices area. So I can see it takes on average 3 days. If I then change this status to paid as well, and then I'm going to mess around with the date created just to give you an example, a hypothetical example. Let's say this was sent on the 1st, and that's 3 days for this invoice, 23 days for this invoice. The invoice dashboard is saying the average time to pay is 13 days. Cool. The next thing that I want to look at is maybe the invoices by stage. So what amount of money is in each stage of the process. So invoices by stage, we would go and add that, invoices by stage. So then I can see how much is in to be sent, how much has been sent, how much is 30, 60, 90 days overdue. And I wouldn't necessarily need paid here. So my x-axis would be the status and the y-axis would be the invoice amount. And then the only group that I don't necessarily need is the paid invoices. So if we then go to our invoices board, let's just reposition these. So that's 30 days overdue. And let's just put some arbitrary figures in here. So 15 or 150K, whatever, 200 and that might be 200K. Invoice amount for this one was 15 or 150. Let's put 12 that's been sent. So we've got 12,000 is to be sent, 300,000 sent, 10,000 30 days, and then we've got a $200,000 invoice that's overdue. If I then go to my invoice dashboard, we should be able to see. I don't know why it's not pulled through yet. Change that to sent as well. That would be why. Go to my invoices dashboard. I can see the different stages of our process. If I go to our groups, this should include to be sent invoices. If I go to our x-axis or customize, we want to show empty values as well. So to be sent value. So now I can see the invoices by the different stages. So I can see that we've got 300,000 sent, 200,000 90 days overdue. We want to keep that down as much as we possibly can. And then we can see the different stages nice and easy here. Another data point that I'll probably look to add just off the back of this is 90 plus days overdue amount. So this, especially as a dashboard, would be a key indicator that I would look to see. And it would just show me how much money is 90 days overdue. So the only group that I want here is the 90 days overdue. The numbers column is going to be one by one. It's just going to be invoice amount. Customize, I'll just put it in the dollar. Manual, probably 2 decimal places here. And that's pretty much it. So now at a glance, I can come to my dashboard and see, oof, $200,000 overdue. We need to get that paid as soon as possible. Okay. Another widget that we might have is another numbers column. And this would be total outstanding balance. So this will show me the total amount of money across all of our different stages that is due to come in. So this again would be one by one, invoice amount. Customize would be in the dollar or whatever currency, manual 2 decimal places. And then the only group that we wouldn't want is the paid invoices. So I can see now that we've got a total outstanding balance of $522,000. Which is, well, depending on the size of your business, that could either be a considerable amount of money or it could be negligible amount of money. So invoice ID, status, invoice, I'm trying to think. What we could look at as another data point is invoices created per month. So invoice value per month. Now, this could be a very helpful indicator for you, especially as if you're doing projects and you might be tracking revenue, but revenue for a project, let's say the project's $100,000 and you track the revenue of the project, but it's actually broken up into 5 milestones of $20,000 each. And then you want to track, let's say, the invoice value, the actual amount that is being invoiced on a monthly basis. This could be quite helpful. So we would have an x-axis of date created and then a y-axis of one by one, and it would just be invoice amount. So I can see in September, we've done $522,000 worth of billing. I can then put a benchmark line in as well. So I could say the minimum we want to really be doing is 400,000. And then I could change that to red and I'd call this minimum. And then the groups that we want all the groups. There's nothing that we really want to hide here. If I then go to our invoices, and just as an example, I'll change this to, so that's 150K. So I'll change that to August. We can then see on our invoice dashboard how that then adjusts. So we were massively under for August. We're getting close to September. You get the idea, right? The next thing that we probably want to look at here, I'm just having a look to see what else we've got. I would probably want to see cash flow by due date as well. So we'd add another widget. This is going to be cash flow by due date. And then we go 3 dotted button. and then settings, and then chart type standard. X-axis is going to be our due date in this case. And then our Y-axis is going to be the invoice amount, not the count of items. And this is going to show me everything that's due by month. Now, it's important to note here, and there's an argument to say that you could actually stack the bar graph, stack it by the status. So then you would see the different due date amounts. So this, I can see here that we've got a due date for this particular invoice of October, but it's actually 90 days overdue. So it was due in October, but it is 90 days overdue. That's where it gets a little bit confusing, in the sense that if you've got a due date, so let's take this one. This is obviously 90 days overdue. So it actually would have been probably sent in July, August, September, October. Yeah, give or take, right? So we've then got this amount, cash flow by due date of July, but it's now, we're almost in October. So it was meant to come in then, but it hasn't. So what I would do is I'll go to groups, and the only group that I wouldn't want here is paid invoices. And then there's not really much else that I would want to see, but the idea being that this can predict cash flow up until people are late to pay. You can start running some slightly more complicated formulas, but it's by no means perfect. But at the same time, if most of your clients pay within your payment terms, so let's imagine this is due in November, 30th of November of 150,000, this will predict your cash flow, and also based on the status as well. So hopefully that gives you an idea as to what's possible. Now, another data point that you might want to look at, and this is probably going to be one of my final ones, not a numbers column, actually, is going to be a chart. And this is going to be invoices paid per month. So we only want to see the invoices that are paid on a monthly basis. Now, I suspect you probably can't see that because of my big head. So I'll move it over here. We'll go to settings, chart type. X-axis is going to be the date paid. The Y-axis is going to be the invoice amount. And then that's pretty much it. I would probably don't really need to do anything else. The only group that I want is the paid invoices group. And that's pretty much it. So now if I go to my invoices board and I change the status of this $200,000 invoice to paid, that would then update on my invoice dashboard, and it would show me the invoices paid per month. I can see that we actually got paid $200,000 in September. Now, if you have connected your projects or your clients or whatever, and you've created connection columns between your invoices board and, let's say, your milestones board or your projects board or your clients board, you could then track a lot of even more interesting things. Let's say invoice value per month by client, invoice value per month by project, average time to pay by client, average time to pay by project, outstanding invoice amount by client, by project, paid amount, cash flow by due date per client, per project, however you want to look at it as well. But obviously we haven't done that in this video, but if you did want to, that is obviously possible. I don't know what I was doing with this numbers column up here. We'll get rid of that. But hopefully this gives you an idea as to what's possible with reporting for invoice tracking inside of Monday.com. If you would like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, doing things like this, or anything, any slightly more complicated, such as integrating this with your accountancy software, check out the link below, book a call with me, and we can have a chat about how we can potentially help. Appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. If you've got any questions or comments, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you would like our help, click the link in the description below. And hopefully I'll be speaking to you very soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.